Live service games are a fairly young part of the industry, rearing their head in the early 2000s with the creation of the MMO, massively multiplayer online games like RuneScape and World of Warcraft. Also referred to as games as a service, these games provided you with a near endless amount of content, where the solid gameplay loop extended out as far as the eye could see to make sure you kept playing. Whilst developers were happy to create new content for you to play, they didn't do it for free, and these early MMOs sought your money by way of monthly subscriptions, creating a sunk cost fallacy that kept you within their ecosystem. These games were by no means bad, and I myself spent an inhuman amount of time playing World of Warcraft as a teenager. However, as time went on, more monetization was bolted onto these games, and other publishers began to take notice of just how much recurrent customer spending they could get from having everyone stuck in their hamster wheel. This led to the creation of games as a service which had no subscription costs, but implemented significant microtransactions to keep the game running. Games like Team Fortress 2, Dota 2 and League of Legends being huge frontrunners in the space. Once publishers saw how much money could be made in the PC market, it didn't take long for these live service games to reach the more casual console market, and in 2014, one of the first true games of this genre emerged, Destiny. From here, the gloves were off and games like Overwatch, Fortnite and Apex Legends stormed onto the scene, each vying for your time and money. This gets me onto the title of the video, and yes, it is intentionally a bit clickbaity, but what algorithm chasing video title isn't? I know there have been some major successes like the ones I mentioned before, or more recently Marvel Rivals, but you can't overlook just how many live service flops have happened compared to their successful counterparts, and I truly think the live service era, where publishers seem to be constantly chasing the trend, is finally coming to an end. Games like Anthem, Battleborn, Hyperscape, Lawbreakers, Babylon's Fall, Concord, Evolve, Marvel's Avengers, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, Foam Stars, Radical Heights, Paragon, The Culling have all fell short of expectations, and that isn't even close to all of them. Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we're going to take a look at not only what contributes to the death of a live service game and why the era is coming to a close, but how we can potentially avoid these traps and deliver a game that can last a long time, whilst also providing gamers with what they want, a solid, ever-changing experience that's fun. Unlike what the publishers tend to start with when it comes to developing games as a service, let's start with the overall gameplay loop of the game. There's often reports of developers being told to start with a monetization system first, then working backwards to create a game around it. But what if the game they create is completely bereft of story, soul, or good mechanics?
Hello, I like money.
I think possibly the best example of this was the recent flop from the creators of the Arkhamverse, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Known for creating one of the most innovative combat systems in the third-person action space, Rocksteady Studios announced they were creating a live service game back in July of 2010. 14 years later, the game finally released, much to the ire of the gaming community. Despite the Suicide Squad all having defined movesets, weapons and character, in order to make them all homogeneous and have a loot system crowbarred into the game, each of the playable characters had guns. As such, even the giant Super Shark had to have a minigun, despite him being a god and being able to tear people apart with his bare hands. On top of this, the enemies were all reduced more or less to the same thing, with the only variation between them being moveset and colour, with a total of 3 different enemy types. After 14 years, people expected this to be a true masterpiece of a game, and given the weapons all felt the same, traversal all felt the same, and abilities felt very underwhelming, many people found this to be the most generic, bargain bin gameplay available. This is where the endgame came in. You see, despite having a sort of bare-bones story mode revolving around the same mission types, you reach the end boss of fighting Brainiac, the big bad. The thing is, once he was beaten, the game stopped and told you, oh wait, this was Brainiac 1 of 13, you need to do this 13 more times. Yep, 13 more times of doing the exact same thing, released over seasons with new characters who fundamentally had the same moveset. The characters being smoothed down and the edges being sanded off to make a single homogeneous playstyle killed whatever chance the Suicide Squad had of being successful. When you have gameplay that could at best be described as oatmeal, you can't keep people engaged and wanting to come back to see what's next. An example of good gameplay in a live service game would be Destiny or its sequel, where the shooting felt incredibly smooth as it was from the creators of Halo, but that game has a whole story issue of its own.
I don't even have time to explain why I don't have time to explain.
Sticking with gameplay for now, I'm throwing this in as I don't know where else it's best to fit, but something you really need to nail when it comes to making these sorts of games is the UI. When Black Ops 6 released last year, for the first time since Modern Warfare 3, I actually played a Call of Duty game. When I got in for the first time though, I was genuinely blown away by how user-unfriendly and obscure the launcher was. Opting to try and push me into Warzone rather than play the game I'd downloaded was a weird choice, but I guess it works for their mainstream audience. Having a look at the actual menus and interfaces of Call of Duty as a whole these days is just shocking. Everything's in drop-downs, where you're forced to scroll across all the time with the godforsaken mouse cursor that plagues all live service games. The cursor is great for PC players, but given the bulk of live service games target console players, I've never understood why they use it. Slow and unintuitive controls for the menu always lessen the experience of a game, and I think innovation is sorely needed in this space. I've recently spent a lot of time watching my son play games, and given he's 11 years old, he almost exclusively plays live service games unless they're tied into a franchise he loves from a movie, book, or TV show. The reason I bring this up is because I think my son falls into the market most game publishers these days are trying to bring into: kids and teens who regularly play games. And what I've found gets him hooked more than anything else is a progression loop. This is where I want to get into the best example of progression loops being important: Roblox. For a lot of adult gamers, when they look at Roblox, they struggle to see the actual game at play, and initially I was one of them. With it being just user-generated content alongside a monetization scheme, the majority of creators for the game put the cart before the horse, making it so their game was an incremental grind that you could speed up with premium currency. Roblox games are commonly bare-bones experiences with incredibly clever progression loops. Due to the nature of their grind, you can tangibly see incremental progress upgrades, new gear and unlocking features which make life easier, like a faster car or the ability to gain money faster.
Well, basically, I just copied the plant we have now. Then I added some fins to lower wind resistance, and this racing stripe here I feel is pretty sharp.
Agreed. First prize. What?
I found this to be really important to my son's generation for some reason. They don't seem to mind mining in a dungeon for hours if it means at the end of it, they can move on to dungeon 2. They'll spend hours fishing to get the money for a new fishing rod that lets them fish slightly faster and never question the loop, except maybe to ask their parents for Robux to make the experience flow at an acceptable rate. I explored this even more when my son started getting bored of games as a service, wherein story-rich, fun games didn't interest him in the slightest. He didn't want to help a protagonist from A to B, he didn't want to build relationships or anything like that, because the progression loop either wasn't there or it was too obscure to be obvious. A gradual powering up over the course of an RPG wouldn't let him know that he was getting better with enough feedback. And then I suggested Cult of the Lamb. The cutesy art style and chill gameplay felt a good match for his maturity level. Though naturally there are a few questionable parts, the base game seemed tame enough to show him, and this is where he found his stride. The short roguelite sections being a great little gameplay loop, but the progression lay in the building of his village. The more he could upgrade and see a tangible difference in his village, creating a better quality of life for his followers and building resources, the more he enjoyed the game. And this is where I think a lot of live service games struggle, with their progression. Whilst the idea of the sunk cost fallacy only gets you so far in something like a battle pass, without a ranked system or incremental upgrade tree, people don't feel as though they're actually getting anywhere. The game begins to feel stagnant to them, and then they move on. Similarly, when looking at rank modes, there's the idea of being a hard stuck rank in almost every game, and it's creating ways to get out of these ranks that stop games from feeling unrewarding. Something else which commonly leads to the downfall of the live service genre is the trend chasing that occurs within the publishers and studios. Once an executive sees a live service do well, they're so keen to create the same thing within their own company that they never stop to think if it's a good idea to take a developer well known for story-rich single-player RPGs and have them create a live service game. Rather than letting developers work within their skill set, they are pushed into creating live service offerings, and in the end, you get results like Anthem or more recently, Redfall. The developers of Redfall, Arcane Studios, are well known for creating in-depth action-adventure sim games with a heavy reliance on physics systems, multiple paths and endings. Games like Dishonored 1 and 2 and the Prey reboot were well received by critics and general audiences alike for the level of freedom they had interacting with the world, as well as twisting and turning stories and world building Arcane managed to pack into them. This is why it confused people when Redfall was announced in June of 2021. A 4-player co-op vampire slaying game sounds great on paper, and with the pedigree Arcane Studios had for making great games, people were tentatively excited to see what could come from the title. Upon launch, however, what we got was anything but promising. An interesting premise boiled down to a generic looter shooter with bad shooting mechanics, uninteresting characters, and story cutscenes which were just still images. By having a studio who are experts in one area bend to an entirely different style of game, they just didn't know how to create effective systems in an entirely new genre. Used to working a narrative around a single protagonist? Well, now you have to fit one around 4 players at once, with none of the time to flesh the characters out because people will get bored watching cutscenes in a multiplayer game. Known for engaging in stealth gameplay and sim elements, well, nobody plays stealth games anymore, and it won't work in a team of 4. You also can't get the sim elements to work for 4 people on a server at once due to the strain the physics would have on the engine and server response. I didn't envy Arcane Studios having to make this game. It's like a painter being told to make a sculpture. If you couple all these creative issues with the fact the game launched severely underbaked with glitches everywhere, terrible AI and missing textures, you've got a really bad game. Redfall launched in May 2023, and officially had its last patch in May 2024, with Arcane Austin closing its doors permanently as a direct result of Redfall's failure. Releasing on Microsoft's Game Pass service, Phil Spencer, the head of Microsoft Gaming, actually apologized for the state of the game and not being more involved in its development. When you start reaching public apology levels of bad, you know it was a bad idea to twist a great studio into a mold that doesn't fit them.
Are you nuts? The thing fits in there perfectly. Look, he's fitting right now.
Let this be a word of warning to all publishers that force their developers to chase a trend instead of working within their skill set. Next up on the live service chopping block is the development time and the release window. These two things come hand in hand, as you don't want to spend years making a first-person shooter just to release in between Battlefield and Call of Duty like Titanfall 2 did. Most modern AAA game development can take anywhere between 3 and 7 years, depending on a variety of factors like if it's a new IP, has its own proprietary engine, or has lots of network features. The important thing to remember during this dev window is the budget. Ever since COVID in 2020, we've seen delays be commonplace in the industry, and for the most part gamers are positively receiving this news as long as communication is clear from the dev team. Where this can become a problem is when things like feature creep come in, causing new things to be added, meaning certain systems have to be overhauled, retested, and maybe even scrapped, resulting in the infamous moniker of development hell. Once the budget starts getting out of hand or a financial milestone starts coming up, we see shareholders try to push publishers to just release the game and fix it later. This results in buggy launches and worse games, but more importantly it affects the release window. And here's where I want to talk about Concord. Concord started development in 2018. Being a live service hero shooter with larger than life characters, it would definitely fit in at the time. A unique selling point was that the game would have a story that encompassed the multiplayer matches. It would develop in seasons as cutscenes around the main experience, expanding on the characters as it went. The problem is, following a 6-year dev time and an acquisition of the developer by Sony, the market on hero shooters was already cornered by the time it released. The likes of Battleborn and Lawbreakers showed that when it came to hero shooters, nobody could really ape Overwatch, which despite the rocky launch of Overwatch 2, still had an avid fanbase. And therein lies the problem. When an idea is born based on market trends and what's in,
so hot right now.
By the time you actually get the game developed, there's a raft of companies with the same ideas, all vying for the same space. Meaning in a world of hero shooters with quirky characters, you can make your heroes as quirky as you like, but if someone's beat you to the punch, you need to offer something truly unique gameplay-wise to stand out. It's important if you do have a game you want to make, you release at a time when there aren't a ton of other similar games releasing, so you have more of a chance of people testing your game out, rather than sticking with their old favourites. Tying in with this point is the next nail in the live service coffin, the saturation of the market. I'm not going to repeat myself and say don't release a game that already exists in 3 formats, but instead I want to look at this from the core live service gameplay ethos. Publishers, when they release a live service, want you to live in that ecosystem they've created, with the idea being that you're paying for microtransactions or battle passes. They rely on the idea of the sunk cost fallacy, that you've sunk so much of your time into the game that you feel obligated to buy the next battle pass, and you've spent so much money on skins, it'd be a waste to stop playing now. I myself fell into this trap playing Apex Legends, where I played the release version of the game, then never touched it again till Season 4. During COVID, the sense of progression in the rank mode kept me sane, with me sinking thousands of hours into it, and when I started to get disenchanted with the game, I found it hard to just stop. With hundreds of pounds spent on battle passes, heirlooms, skins, it felt really hard to walk away from, but I just wasn't happy playing it anymore. So, to get to the point, imagine how invested I was in this game. Then consider the game publisher's expectations. All publishers want that level of attention from you. That level of engagement, that level of spending. Battle passes, login bonuses, limited time events, daily and weekly challenges, these things before long do start to feel like a second job.
That just sounds like slavery with extra steps.
Ooh la la, someone's gonna get laid in college.
There's no world in which you can do your dailies for 3 live service games every single day, then have the time to actually do anything else. And as such, without realizing it, the live service game becomes its own worst enemy. Time is a finite resource, and as much as we'd love to spend all of our time gaming, we have real jobs and commitments to attend to. Heck, it's why I created my review series, Do I Have Time for This? Once you start implementing daily reasons to play that aren't for the fun of the game, you run the risk of creating unhealthy psychological loops, which prey on people who need a routine, and at worst, you alienate the casual player who can't dedicate every single day to one game. Now let's say you have the perfect gameplay formula, or some really solid foundations. You've released in a quiet window, and your idea is unique enough that people pay attention. What could stop a live service game with so much potential? I think for this one, Helldivers 2 is actually a fairly good use case. If you move aside the server issues after its popularity soared upon release, you can tell the developers Arrowhead Studios struggle to keep up with the demand. After the initial raft of content with a few new stratagems and some fairly bare-bones warbonds, the main thing people were after were new missions and enemy types. Helldivers 2 released in February of 2024, and the first update that introduced new content beyond 1 or 2 mission types was the Escalation of Freedom in August of the same year. Don't get me wrong, I loved Helldivers 2, and can't praise it enough. But once you hit the hardest difficulty back in February and upgraded everything in a couple of weeks, there was simply nowhere to go and nothing to do after that. It was this lack of meaningful content updates, alongside their incessant need to balance every weapon and stratagem to be viable, that ended up causing people to move elsewhere. And whilst there's definitely still fans out there, even adding the new faction in December of 2024 did little to draw the original audience back in, as they'd long moved on to other games. Another side of this lack of updates argument is how fast some publishers are to abandon live service games after their release. If we look at an example like Babylon's Fall, on paper this game should have been a roaring success. Published by Square Enix and developed by Platinum Games, the pedigree of a great game was there. However, this game launched in March of 2022 to absolutely scathing reviews, calling it ugly, boring, and with a lot of criticism based around the actual gameplay of the title, saying there was a lot of reuse of assets and essentially just running down the same corridor over and over again. Babylon's Fall didn't last a year as a live service before it was shut down for good in February of 2023, in some cases only having single-figure player counts. Square Enix and Platinum did nothing to save the game's reputation, and you could tell it was just left to fester and die, with no real content updates to speak of.
Please, Daddy.
I told you, when I'm finished, you can have what's left.
There won't be any left. There's never any left.
Happy Thanksgiving!
And Babylon's Fall isn't an outlier in this respect. Concord lasted 2 weeks, third-person battle royale Radical Heights lasted just over a month, as did the alleged scam game the day before. I feel like this is more publisher-led than developer-led, but they can't look at a game underperforming at the start of its life cycle, pronounce it dead, and shut it all down in a few weeks. This just goes to show you they never had faith in it to begin with. Ubisoft has been a big proponent of supporting their live service games whether they flop or not. A really good recent example being Skull and Bones, where they're aiming to add in sword fighting mechanics and third-person combat to their critically panned pirate ship sailing game. Admittedly, this should have been in from the start, but as we've seen with For Honor and Rainbow Six Siege, a disappointing launch doesn't have to be the nail in the coffin most AAA studios think it is. It's very strange that Ubisoft of all companies is the one held high as a supporter of the live service. Let's get on to the thing people have likely been waiting for this whole time. The main thing people point out is the cynical, capitalist backbone of the live service genre, the microtransactions. Starting out as innocent bits of horse armor in Elder Scrolls Oblivion, these small bits of often cosmetic content rapidly got out of hand as the 2010s went on, especially with the introduction of randomized elements made popular via Overwatch's infamous loot boxes in 2017. Microtransactions take many formats, so let's have a look at the most popular ones. Before we get into it, can I just say, I booted up Apex for the first time in probably about a year, if not longer, to capture the footage for this section, and why is there 3 tiers of Battle Pass now? It's so gross how much this game is monetized nowadays. Anyway, moving on. First of all, cosmetic only microtransactions. These are the most defended and most accepted pieces of in-game content you can buy currently. These are often skins for your character, weapon, or maybe something as pointless as a spray you put on the floor. As they don't affect gameplay in any way, people are often more lenient with their existence, often stating it doesn't hurt anyone. Well, when it comes to neurodivergent people, I can in fact confirm this sort of microtransaction hurts them. When you consider the cost, it varies massively from game to game, but can cost hundreds of pounds or dollars for a gun skin in the quote-unquote right game. Cost aside, it's extremely intentional the way these skins are marketed to you. You only need to look at the patterns for matchmaking players with premium skins to those without, or the more egregious example of Call of Duty opening loot boxes publicly on Normandy's beaches. Publishers want you to see others with things you don't have to promote FOMO, the fear of missing out. This FOMO is then used to exploit either the weak-willed or neurodivergent to part with their cash to make sure they're keeping up with the Joneses, and this often isn't seen as predatory until you've spent $200 on heirlooms for Apex Legends. Following on from this are the gameplay affecting pay-to-win mechanics. These were slowly and sneakily implemented in full-price AAA games occasionally, but once core audiences started pointing it out and review-bombing games, they were quickly removed. Now saved mainly for games on your mobile, pay-to-win mechanics nowadays usually revolve around things like time boosters or XP boosters, rather than outright paying to get more damage or anything. It should go without saying, but paying for an in-game advantage is just plain wrong, and you have to be downright evil to knowingly sell this sort of thing to your audience. To round off this unholy trinity of people scheming to take your money is the loot boxes I mentioned earlier.
Okay, Bart, your turn, your turn. You got the dud!
Hey! He looks just like you, Poindexter!
This can be a mix of the previous two microtransactions, but with an extra layer of confusion on top. The fact that what you get is completely randomized. While some countries insist the odds of you getting certain things out of these randomized mechanics is labelled, not all countries force publishers to do so, meaning you could be buying 10 loot boxes with a 1 in a million chance of getting what you're actually after. Randomized rewards offer a special type of dopamine hitting our lizard brains that keep making us want to do one more pull, and with content creators doing pack opening streams, oftentimes playing with the house money, the issue only gets murkier. On top of this, you can also find games with premium currency like Fortnite. While certainly not the worst example of this, V-Bucks are probably one of the most well-known virtual currencies in the world. The idea behind this is to, again, obfuscate the idea of how much money you're spending. Items are intentionally priced so the lowest bundle of currency can't quite cover it by a small amount, and you just need that little bit more, meaning you need to pay for either 2 bundles or the bigger bundle that's slightly cheaper. Games will usually offer piecemeal currency as part of a battle pass, in-game quest rewards, or as daily login bonuses. This can also spiral into multiple currencies which can have their own weird exchange rate, but are usually used to say, look, you can earn silver in game, but if you buy 1 gold, it's worth 100 silver. Often tied into these microtransactions in the bigger games are crossover events. Regardless of whether the tone fits or not, publishers will put any character into any game, provided the license holder agrees. It's mentalities like this that cause something like the horror franchise Alien to be in Fortnite, or Nicki Minaj to be executing people with her butt in Call of Duty. Not that live service games are well known for their immersion, but running around in Fortnite whilst Ellen Ripley hits the gritty with the Terminator is just bizarre, and reeks of cynical cash grab. If we also skip over battle passes, which are more of a microtransaction these days, publishers can be seen charging a premium entry fee on top of all this additional monetization. Rather than being a free-to-play title with extra monetization to pay the bills, some companies, more often than not it's Sony, will charge an upfront cost for the game, and then have these elements in it anyway. This is typically cheaper than your $70 price tag, but it's usually still around the $40 or £40 mark, meaning it's a not insignificant amount of money they're asking for. Then once you're in there, you're hit with limited time deals, crossovers, battle passes, and all other sorts of monetization just clawing at your wallet. It's extremely off-putting how money-grubby live service games became over time. Some games get a free pass by their community, some are rightly lambasted for their sneaky tactics, and some get hauled over the coals but people buy the stuff anyway, giving completely the wrong message to the higher-ups. As you can likely tell from this footage, the bigger games have only added more and more ways to extract money from you over time, to the point where it just becomes unbearable to navigate and play. Ultimately, the large majority of these games are considered quote-unquote free, but when you have so many things to buy that are all completely pointless thrown in your face, it just puts you off playing some of them. Additional monetization is necessary for a live service's longevity if it is the main game or only game the publisher has right now, but it needs to be done at an appropriate price, minus the psychological warfare that's so commonly integrated into the way live service games operate. It's a fine line, as there will always be a level of FOMO for people who miss out on certain event skins, but as long as your microtransactions are affordable, transparent, and not hidden behind randomized mechanics, you can make a successful game monetizable. So here we are, having discussed a ton of failures in the live service space, but I don't like making purely negative videos. So let's take a look at the live service pitfalls we've discussed and see if we can present them in a positive light in a way that could make a successful live service. First off, pick a studio with a proven track record in creating live services and being able to support them long term. There's no use picking a single story player developer to make your live service game. If the studio itself doesn't have any experience, make sure to hire people who do. Once you picked your studio, make sure you have a solid gameplay foundation to build your service around. Things need to feel tactile and responsive, fun and engaging, on a level that makes people want to keep playing, regardless of if it's a live service or not. Once you have your solid and fun gameplay, look at the progression loop. Do players feel more empowered over time? Does their gear look cooler? Are they unlocking more skills, more gameplay options? Are they contributing to a larger goal? And more importantly, by the time they reach the end of the loop, make sure it feels rewarding enough that they want to go around just one more time without spending more money. The next thing to consider after all of this is market saturation. First of all, is your game unique enough to stand out? Or are there a dozen other games that follow the same mold? You need to have a game that has its own personality, a set of mechanics or a progression loop you can't find in any other game, and you can't make gameplay sessions last forever. You can't make people come back every day or have to play for hours every day, making it feel like a job. There can of course be longer content for those who want it, but it shouldn't be at the core of the experience you make. Timing is also incredibly important. Try and avoid huge tentpole releases like a new Grand Theft Auto, but also look at other games in the same genre and avoid releasing around the same time. The quieter your release window is, the better time you'll have getting people in the door. Once the game has been developed and released in a safe window with minimal competition, the only thing left to worry about is support. Have a roadmap planned out for future content and be completely clear and transparent when things are coming and if they get delayed. Players are far more forgiving of delays if it means what they're waiting for is mechanically sound and free of glitches and issues. Make sure what you're releasing is substantial, transformative, and something that feels fresh, and if people don't pick up the game straight away, don't immediately abandon it and leave it to die on the vine. It can be saved. And finally, monetization. Developers need to get paid, and to support the game long term, money does need to come from somewhere. Whether this be big paid expansions, smaller cosmetic options or a battle pass, make sure what is being offered has significant value without breaking the balance of the game. Don't put crazy prices on things and stay humble. A blue recolor of a skin should not cost $10, so make sure you price things in such a way that everyone can take part, not just the super rich. Keep cosmetic, avoid time deals and manipulative psychological tactics, put ways to earn things into the game itself as a reward, so there's more ways to unlock things than just to buy it. So why is it that seemingly all new live service games are failing? If you look at these 7 points, they tend to suffer greatly in one or many of these, and in some cases, you can excel at 6 and just be really bad at one of them, and it's a complete fail. It's a balancing act, and if you don't offer the right gameplay and value to players whilst respecting their time and money, you're going to fall short and fail. This is something you can think upon next time you see a live service game get announced, and you can play a little game with the checklist in this video to try and gauge if it'll be successful or not. And hey, maybe you can tell me it's all wrong down in the comments and list even more reasons why live services are successful. The live service era truly does seem to be coming to an end, and less publishers are going to be chasing after the games as a service pot of gold at the end of the very ugly looking rainbow. I for one am thankful for this, and I'm looking forward to getting back to truly great games that don't expect all of your time and all of your money. Whilst they'll never fully go away for good, and nor should they, this definitely feels like the death of it being the only game genre publishers are willing to greenlight. Live service games do have a place in the gaming landscape. They're loved by so many players, and a lot of friendship groups use it as a place to hang out and chat with something to do in the background, and there's truly nothing wrong with that. The last thing I want to say on this topic is we all love games. We all love playing games, and they should never feel like a job, or have such a sunk cost fallacy we can't stop playing them due to how much we've invested in them. This is a hobby for fun, for escapism, and if you ever feel obligated or tied to a game, it's time to put the controller down, go outside, and leave it in the past. No game should dictate your life or your spending habits, and countless publishers have tried and will continue to try to psychologically manipulate gaming into doing just that. Respect yourself, respect your time, and most importantly, vote with your wallet. And there goes another deep dive into gaming. Today's episode got a little dark in spots, so if you want to chat or share stories around live service games, just drop them in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more reviews, lists, topical videos and deep dives. I try to post once a week, so there's always something to watch and talk about. If you want to disagree entirely and tell me live services are the best games ever and they never fail, I'm over on x.com/gracious_rhino. I'm Gracious Rhino, look after each other, and I'll catch you soon.